Hello, everyone. We're so glad that you joined us today. This is Renee,
And I'm Greg.
and today we want to talk to you about tried and true tips to managing design build projects. So grab your favorite cup of joe or whatever you need, and let's get going. Okay, so in this module, we want to talk through tips that we have found that are needed to successfully manage design build as quality control managers. First, we're going to talk through submittals, and then the RFI, ASI, and mod process, site visits, and then we'll finish up with as-builts.
So as quality control managers, we all know that design build projects, it's tough to manage the designers, right? And like Renee said, we've got tried and true methods that we've vetted out in the field on actual projects that seem to have worked really, really well for us. And in the end, it's worked well for the design team.
Yeah, and keep in mind, when you are a QC manager for a general contractor, the design build firm on a design build project is under the general contractor. So the general contractor should really be driving that design build process. It is a partnership, and it's important to go into it with that partnership attitude, but when the day's done, everything falls back on the GC. So if the project does not go through the design process to meet the contractual requirements, it's going to fall back on the general contractor. And that's why it's important as QC managers that we know how to manage and drive the processes, pieces of the processes that touch our world.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So first we're going to talk about submittals. When you meet with the design firm, it's really important that up front, before the design is done, that you establish a flow of the submittals, a submittal flow. You need to talk about where you're going to send them to and turnaround times. So just like your client's going to have a required review time, your design firm needs to also commit to required review time. I've seen that range from everything from 4 days to 14 to 30 on some submittals. So have that up front, establish up front what they're going to commit to. Also, many design firms have a submittal clerk or a person that's going to be in charge of routing the submittals. So that you send them to only one point of contact, and then that person disseminates them amongst the design team. Keep in mind that on design teams, a lot of times they may not have every component of the design in-house. So they may hire other design firms under their umbrella. They may have architectural and electrical, but they have to hire a mechanical engineer or a commissioning agent or however it's set up contractually. So that's why it's real important to understand the flow. We live in electronic time now, so I would never imagine that hard copies have to be shuffled to a design firm. They're almost always electronic. So, but make sure that you talk about that flow and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, you can get caught in the trap, if you don't establish this right out of the gate. So you, like Renee said, your owner or your client has a dedicated amount of time that they have to review. So you've got that time, then you've got the time for the design firm, and if you have a specialty design, fire alarm, cathodic, commissioning, that adds time. And so you've got to establish, your subcontractor sends you a submittal, let's just say it's finishes. And so you track it and you log it, and that starts the clock. And if you don't decide and if you don't determine, you send it to your design team and they take a month to turn that around, and then it's got to go to the owner for approval and they take a month, you're 60 days out from ever being able to order.
Right.
And so you've got to establish that right at the beginning of the project,
That's
or else it'll bite you.
And that's how you're going to base your schedule for
Absolutely.
when you need to be requesting and when you got to have those submittals in your hands.
For sure.
The next step is to politely ask, and I say politely because this is going to be a rub, no matter if it's a firm you've worked for or with for years and years, but you need to ask to scrub that register before it's uploaded into client systems, especially on Federal Corps of Engineer projects. They put that register in their QCS RMS system. You need to scrub it before it goes in. Once it's in somebody's system, whether it's a Prolog or a QCS RMS or some kind of access database, believe me, we've seen them all. Whatever software your client's using, before it's uploaded, that's when you got to have it scrubbed. Once it's uploaded, it's going to cost you time and your employer money to get them out of there. Meaning if you've got Oh, this is my favorite example. So we were doing a pipeline project on a base in Colorado, and the register came out, and the design firm was like, "There's no need to scrub it. It's good. We know it's good." And I said, "Oh, just let me look at it. Just give me an hour with it, and then I'll get back to you." And they had a whole section on pools, and there's no way
For a pipeline project.
there's a swimming pool on this base, let alone for a pipe project. Swear it happened. I'm the one that reviewed it. It was completely crazy town. So you'll never know what you're going to see loaded into a register. And there's so many registers too that have duplicates and duplicate items and all that. Once it's loaded into someone's system, it's a paper trail to explain why you want it deleted from the system.
And it costs you time and money to get it removed.
Time and money, yeah. So just please, please, please make sure that you're able to scrub those registers before they're uploaded. The other piece of this is to have a tracking log to monitor review time for the designers. And some software is set up where you can have multiple reviewers and you can track the submittal from, cradle to grave, when you get it from a sub all the way through it being approved by the client. But sometimes you're working with systems that don't have that. And again, QCF's RMS is one of those. That tracks the time with core review only. That's not going to give you the time tracking on the designers or any of those specialty reviewers that Greg mentioned. So it's going to be really important that you have that tracking mechanism so that you can explain to your site team and your project manager where the holdups are. If you get going on a project and your submittals are holding up starts, they're going to come down on you as the QC manager, and they're going to be up your skirt, and they're going to be breathing fire. So you've got to be able to show that you didn't leave stuff sit on your desk and that you processed it timely, you got it to this person, they're not doing it within the set amount of review time. That's the kind of ammo that your site team needs to know so that they can stay on them. And so all the entities, in a perfect world, all the entities abide by their review time and nothing gets held up and it flows awesome, but that very seldom happens.
Well, yeah, and more to that point, I mean, if you've got a designer that you've determined that they've got a review time of 14 days, and the clock starts as soon as you hit, send on the email or notification in Procore or Prolog or whatever you're using, and they're historically taking too long with their reviews, and you're getting heat from the owner, or the client, and you're getting heat from your PM, and you can go back and you can say, okay, look, the electrical designer is taking double the amount of time that he should. You can show that in your log, and then your project managers or your owners can go to the design team and address it and say, look, we're losing time in our schedule. Either you hurry up and abide by what you said you would, or else you're going to share in any damages or any schedule pushes that come along with that.
Absolutely.
And it's insurance for you guys. Yeah. I mean, you're tracking everything, and you've got to have that to show that you're doing your job.
Absolutely. And I don't want to backtrack, but just talking about the scrubbing of the register, you're going to get that heat, like I said, because there's not a design firm out there that doesn't think that they do everything perfect. And they're not going to want anyone cutting any submittals out. And you're going to have some designers who want all the information, and they think they need to see everything to make sure that their design is actually being adhered to. And then you're going to have some design firms that hardly want to see anything at all. It's going to be a wide gambit. But when you're scrubbing those registers and you're trying to narrow it down, it is a give and take. It's just like if you had a giant scale on your desk, and it's a balancing act on that scale of how much is too much, because more submittals don't just cost your subcontractor and your general contractor time and money. It also costs your design firm. That's their time and money too, in reviewing. And so if you get any buck back of, well, we really don't want to hone that register down much, usually one polite conversation with the lead designer of, well, we understand that. We understand you need to see what you need to see to make sure your design's being implemented, but at the same time, any erroneous or additional submittals is going to cost your firm time and money too. And once you say those words, time and money, they usually loosen their reins on that register a little bit, and then they'll let you hone it down. I don't want you to come away with this with the thinking that we want to whittle all submittals away. We are big components of the register and how important getting those submittals are. However, We've also seen, 45, 50, 70-page registers. We ran those projects, and that many submittals is not necessary for anything.
No, it's
So
not.
it just bogs everything down, and it makes your world so much harder. So if you can make that register as lean and mean as you can up front, it's going to save you a lot of headaches.
So the one additional step that we haven't talked about here that I think is really important to talk about is once you have once you've scrubbed the register, you have buy-in from the designers, and then you have to propose that to the
Yeah,
entity you're working for, whether it's the Corps,
absolutely.
the GSA, or the Department of Energy, or
NIST,
anybody like
yeah,
that.
DPW,
Even if it's a large corporate owner,
right,
they have to accept that.
right,
So then once everybody is on the same page, that's why it's super important to do this early. Then
absolutely.
that gets loaded into the system that everybody has agreed upon for tracking submittals. Now, the caveat to this is two things. So you've scrubbed it, and the designers say that they don't want to review it, but your client that you're working for may refuse to review the submittal until they see the design firm stamp on there.
Yeah,
And that's why it's important to have that discussion with
yeah.
all the partners involved on this project,
Before
all the
it's uploaded,
stakeholders.
right.
That's right. So it's very important to get buy-in of all parties. Even though you're the captain of the ship, you still need buy-in.
Absolutely. And our last bullet here, Greg made mention of it, but discussing the special submittals. So lead, you're typically going to have a lead engineer that has to take a look at those. And I've had a lot of design firms, they just rubber stamp them, right? They don't even look at them, and they tell us, we're not going to look at that. We'll rubber stamp it, so you send it to the lead person. Fire alarm is another one where it's typically self-designed by your fire alarm sub, and then it has to go to the fire department on whatever federal entity you're working for usually. And sometimes those do not go through the design firm. And then commissioning, depending on how your contract is, and we could talk hours. Greg spent years and years as a commissioning agent, and actually that's how we met. He commissioned projects I was on before I stole him to this side of the fence. But commissioning is a different beast, and you're going to see some contracts written where they are an entity controlled by the end user or your client. You're going to see some contracts written where they are owned by the general contractor and work for the general contractor. We've got video blogs on rogue commissioning agents and issues that we've seen and problems we've had, and I know you, by the time you get to this module, you've probably gone through our commissioning module, so you probably know how we feel about that. But commissioning agents have to do their own review, and so a lot of times the design firm won't look at those, and they'll have you send them straight to the commissioning agent for that review.
Yeah, the big one here, ladies and gentlemen, is the fire alarm and the emergency life safety systems.
Yeah.
You've got a dedicated design on that, so your fire alarm contractor, your security contractor, what fire suppression contractor, they come up with the design, right? And then you've got to pass that along. You've got to document that you've sent that to the designer. But you also have to send to the fire department, like Renee was saying. So and this mostly pertains to anything you're doing on a base, on a military base, DoD, Air Force, Marines,
or any federal
Navy.
entity that have their own fire department.
Yeah, they've got to review it.
It's not actually governed by a city fire department. Usually.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they've got to review it. They've got to provide their comment if they have comments and things that need to be changed. You got to send it back to your dedicated designer, and then it finally, once everybody gets done reviewing it, goes to your client. So and that takes time, right?
Yeah.
It's all time that you've got to account for and you've got to track.
The last little thing, I didn't make a bullet, but if you've been following us and you've listened to us talk and you've watched our video blogs, you've probably heard us make mention of submittals being included in the design. And this is an option, and we have ran it, and we were actually the first QC managers to get 95% of submittals on a Corps of Engineer project in the Omaha district approved with the design package, meaning we had the entire team bought out before the design started. So we were able to sit down with our team and the designers, our MEP, right, the main subs, and our design team, and they talked about what submittals we could put in the design package. So they got all that product data together that they had bid and was part of their proposals, and they got it to the design team. The design team approved it. It was sent. The product data sheets were actually just sent as part of the design with the specifications, and then the core also needed to be on board, and they committed to reviewing those submittals as part of the design. And what it did was it took a 2-year project down to less than a year. So we saved that much time and that much paper. It was very painful. It took a lot of convincing. It took a lot of convincing of the design team. It took a lot of convincing of the core. In the end, everybody saw the benefits, and we were able to deliver that product that the base needed within the time frame that they needed it. It was really driven by the base's need, and that's why we did it. It wasn't Greg and Renee deciding to be superheroes and experiment on, can this be done? But it was the only way that we could do it within the time frame, and it worked really slick once we got everybody on board. And it took a lot of upfront work for the QC manager, but then all we had to do was test reports. Really is when, closeout documents is what we were shuffling for paper, and it made it really nice. So know that that's possible. We may do a module on how we actually did that and give you some more insights, but just keep that as a feather in your cap that you can do that with certain entities. Say you just got the electrical bought out. Just getting most of that electrical equipment in as part of the design is going to save you time. Or if you've got, just your mechanical sub, or, anything that you can do is going to save your project time and money on the back end.
Yeah, it's the, and why it's important for the MEPs is you've got long lead equipment, right? Transformers, switchgear, those sometimes, depending on how big they are, take years. You've got mechanical equipment, large air handlers, heat pumps, anything like that. This is not the world that it used to be 10 years ago. Everything takes double the amount of time, and so it really helped in that way too.
And it helped the subs too, because they were able to submit what they had in their price proposal, so they weren't getting hit later on with needing additional money for different material. They were able to get that approved with this design. So as soon as that design was stamped by the end user, which in that case was the core, we released them to order, and they procured right away.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway here is it speeds your schedule up. It allows your subcontractors to bill right away for that equipment, and it's less paper that you have to do during the actual project.
Yeah, it won't work if you can't have it bought out. You got to have that whole project bought out, and that's again is usually out of the control of the QC manager. So it's only special cases where that will work, and we know it. But when you have one of those cases, it could really be a feather in your cap. So that's what we got on submittals. Next, we're going to talk about the RFI, the ASI, and the mod process. So you're watching this module. You definitely know what everything stands for. You know what it is. You got to have logs that track RFIs, ASI, and mods. You got to have logs that track their turnaround time, and you have to have logs that track when you're posting them to your as-builts. And again, by the time you get to this module, you've taken our as-built training. If you haven't, double back and grab it and run through that. But tracking the turnaround time, it's your design team that's going to start that clock. Some RFIs are only going to go between you and the designer, and you're just going to FYI them to your end user. Some of them, though, that actually affect the end product and the design may also need to go through your end user. So keep that in mind. It's just like a submittal, right? It could have multiple reviewers. And I know you guys know this because you've gone through our QC 101 at this point, but RFIs start the whole process. It starts the money chain. You can't get any change orders. You can't get anywhere unless you start with the RFI. Requested ASIs and mods have costs associated with them almost always, and they have to be turned around timely. And it's really important that you talk about that process with your design team. We've worked with designers that could RFI things until the cows come home. They have no problem doing that, but they don't want to do any ASIs because the ASIs take their design, and it takes their time and their money, more of it. So it's really important that as a QC manager, you understand your contractual requirements. When it comes to ASIs and mods, you're going to have soft-spoken clients where you could change the whole world with just an RFI, and they don't need to see ASIs, for formal mods, and that's okay. You're going to get those clients, and that's awesome. Take it as a win, roll with those RFIs and go with it. But if you're doing work for big boys and like the more regimented Corps of Engineers, there is a really set process, and you have to make sure that you understand what that is, and that you've got the design team on board for their requirements too. And then the last bullet here, as-built. Got to as-built everything. Don't think that you can't as-built submittals. You gotta, specifications. You've got to as-built your specs. A lot of times these RFIs and ASIs will change the specs. You gotta chase that all the way through. You've gotta do all of your as-builts on the pages. You gotta do them on the equipment schedules. You gotta do them in the specs. It's gotta be everywhere for it to be a clean set of drawings.
Yeah, so you should have, whether it's a digital file or whether it's, a paper or hard copy, you should have a spec book. And you should have your ASI set of prints and plans. You should be posting the RFIs in there. You should be posting your ASIs, architectural supplemental information, and your mods. Tracking those just like you would submittals. Posting them appropriately, and making sure that they get in front of the people that they should be getting in front of.
Yep. I don't think I have anything else on that
No.
side. Do you? Okay. So our last topic in this module is site visits and as-builts. Excuse me. Pretty important though, up front when you meet with your design team and have like your mutual understanding with your design team, right? Your kickoff with them. You need to find out how many site visits the design team has built into their price. Now I've been on projects where the site team says we're going to come out at 50% and then we want to come out for the final walk. If that's all they've got in it, that's all you're going to see. You also need to make sure that what they have built in meets contractual. So some end users will say, we want to see the design team on the ground in the dirt with us and you X amount of times. Sometimes they don't ever make mention of it. So it's literally what the design team has built in. It's important as a QC manager that you get that down up front because the QC manager will be scheduling that. Your design firm, outside of seeing submittals and RFIs come through, they've got no pulse on what usually is happening on a project. Unless you're doing site pictures and you're getting videos and pictures sent over to them, they won't know where you're at what percentage the project's complete. So it's going to be up to you as a QC manager to be like, hey, design team, we're almost at this benchmark. You said you wanted a site visit here, so we need to get it scheduled in the next few weeks.
And design team, ladies and gentlemen, that's a big, broad term, right? So you've got your architects, you've got your civil, you've got your landscaping,
mechanical, all of them,
mechanical,
right?
Electrical, plumbing.
Yeah.
You've got all of those. So thinking of, a party of 6 or 7 people showing up all at the same time, that would be super nice, but your electrical and your plumbing and your architectural and your civil are all at different times when you reach these milestones.
Yeah, and sometimes they come separately.
Yeah.
Sometimes they all come together in a giant mob.
Absolutely.
But sometimes they will come separate.
But regardless of when they do come, like Renee was saying, you need to schedule that because a lot of time your clients will want to be there at the same time.
Yep, so you got to give notice so you're not doing the dance more than once.
Yep.
You got to make note of those visits in your daily reports because a lot of times they are contractual obligations, and then you can go back and say, yeah, we did this. We did a site visit at 25% or 45 or 60 or whatever it is, and we did it on this day. So it's important to make a note of that in your daily report and make note of who's present. So if the end user didn't show up and chose not to come, it's important to make note of who was there on the walk, especially if staff turnover, like for your client. And then, you get somebody who was more hands-on towards the end, and they're like, well, we were never invited. No, you were invited, and your predecessor chose not to show up. But you need that information.
Yeah.
You need to talk also about as-built percent requirements on submittals. So every contract's different. Some of them want them 30, 60, 90, 100%, and some of them only want 60 and 100. Every contract's going to be different. So read your contract, understand what you are required, and then make sure that the design team understands that. You need to get those as-builts to the design team regularly. You can't wait until 60% and hand them an as-built and think that they're going to have that submittal in time. As-builts are tied to money on a lot of the federal projects, and a lot of times they have somebody that will come to the site trailer monthly and make sure that you're keeping up on them. Sometimes those folks really look and they know what RFI number you're on, and they want to make sure they're current before they release your monthly pay app for the contractor you're working for. Sometimes they're more lenient on that, and when they're more lenient, it's easier for us as QCs to fall behind. But really important that you stay up on that and that you get them to them. The design team has to have time to implement the changes to give you the package for the submittal.
So to expand on that, both Renee and I have, managed our own QC projects, our own construction projects from start to finish, and we also come in and we, are closers for other general contractors that have had, struggles with QCs, and they've hired us to come in and help them close out. So this is long-winded segment to a big problem here. So what we strive to do personally, and what we teach all of our QCs to do, is to send formal notification monthly of what the updates are for the as-builts, and get in the habit of doing that. Yes. You send it monthly, or you shoot an email that says, hey, no updates this month. And the reason why we do that, when we've gone in and we've closed projects out, it could be a year and a half long, $25, $30 million project, and the design team has never received any as-built updates. And so when they formally receive those from us at the end of a project, and you're looking at, final completion, substantial completion is only, a couple of weeks away, the design team has received 2 months worth of as-built work, and you're behind, and there's nothing that you can do to make that better.
Right.
And so it just remember, if you've had a lot of updates and red lines on your projects, the more time it takes for the design team to incorporate those changes. Yeah. And until you get those and turn those over, your project isn't done.
No. And I get questions all the time. How do you get those updates to the design firm? And it's a wide range of options. So if you're working for a small company, and we both have QC'd for smaller companies, it could mean once a month you taking those your as-built package to your printer, having them scan it electronically so you can get a disc to the design team so they can see all the physical red lines that are made in your site trailer. It could mean you're set up with a scanner and you've got a nice plotter type scanner size, and you can feed them through and scan them yourself. It could mean you got a hand scanner. I ran those. It could mean you have a system with electronic pins where every as-built that's made and written with the different pins automatically goes into a system that's real time, that then the design firm can just get in once a month and pull down the updates. I've ran the full gamut. Mm-hmm. And all of it's doable. You just have to know what technology the company you're working for has and how to manage it.
It could be very manual, or it can be very high-tech and super simple.
Yeah.
So the
end means is still the most important part.
That's right.
Getting them in per your deadlines.
That's right. And a little caveat to this, if you are also not staying up with your subcontractors and forcing them to do the red lines, so they can be updated into the as-builts. I mean, you don't want to get caught, caught with having to do 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks worth of red line updates with your subcontractors. Absolutely. Especially if they don't remember what needs to be redlined, you're in a bad spot. So, and again, like Renee said, we've got as-built posting, training, as part of the.
We talk more about it in there, and I'm sure you guys have already gone through that by the time you get to this point. If not, go back and listen to our as-built posting, because it's really important. As-builts are tied to your final payment. You're meaning your company you're working for, whether it's a subcontractor or a general contractor. Your final payment is tied to the final deliverables, and as-built is one of them. And on the feds, usually they tie a portion of our retainage to the as-builts. So if you are not able to turn over your final as-builts the day of project turnover, your company is not able to send that final bill in for your final amount, and they'll hold your money. They hold the money of your employer, and that's a big one. We always teach our QC managers to strive to not hold that up. So we strive to have a final as-builts turned in right before or the day of your final walk, like literally hand them the disc and give them the transmittal and be like, here you go. And then your project management team can submit that final bill. It makes a really big difference. It's a big feather in your cap for as a QC manager if you shoot and manage for that.
Yeah.
And that takes us to review. So we've talked through the submittals and the register. Scrub, scrub, scrub. That's the word. That little cloud just reminds me of my little scrubby, 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 scrubby. Those registers before they go in, and make sure that you talk about how you're going to manage them with your design team.
Review times, who it goes
Yep.
to,
Yes.
things like that. It's super important.
Yep. RFI, ASIs, and mods. Make sure you understand contractually what you're held to. Define it up front. Talk about it with your design team and track it. Yep. And then we talked about site visits and managing the as-built and the expectations of the as-built from the start.
Yeah, if you've, and again, you know, we've made all these mistakes, and we've made the mistakes for you.
Yeah.
It's been the nightmare scenarios that we're describing are nightmares that we've lived through.
Yeah.
And we're telling you all the keys to success here because we don't want to see you make them.
No, go make your own mistakes.
Yeah.
Don't make ours.
Don't make ours. Make your own, and you will, and
Yeah.
you'll learn from it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, you may even listen to this and say, you know, that all makes sense. Why wouldn't you do this? And then, you know, you find yourself not doing it, and
then you know.
and then it bites you. But if you're already doing this, and this is all stuff that you already know, I'm proud of you guys. And
you're hitting the ground, you're running.
You're running, and you're off to a great start. And we just, you know.
And they're A's and B contract design firms, just like everything else, right?
Yeah.
And you don't always get your A team.
No.
Sometimes cost and economy and bid time. Sometimes you get design firms that aren't used to the federal arena, and you've got to help them, and you got to help train them on the federal requirements. And sometimes you get that A string that's been doing federal work for decades, and they know the drill, and nothing in these slides that we talked about is going to be a surprise to them, and they're just going to roll with it and partner with you. So
yeah, and we hope that's what you get, you know, but
yeah.
Odds are you're going to have one that you're going to have to drag across the finish line.
And it's important that QCs are involved in that management.
Absolutely.
Don't let the design firm run wild, because ultimately their checks get cut by the general contractor. So if you're a QC for that GC, you need to be helping your GC to manage that process.
Yeah, document it, and then that way your ownership and your project management team can help you when you do come across problems with an unresponsive designer.
Absolutely. And that wraps it up for us. So we really appreciate you, and we appreciate you coming to the QCU for this module. And we hope that you learn some, trips and ticks.
Yep, we wish you the very best and success on the field. Good luck, QCs.
And we'll see you on another one.
Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about QC Manager's role in design review. So today we're going to discuss being invited to your very first design review. And when you get invited to the table, sometimes it can be intimidating and you sit there thinking, now what? We're going to talk through that. We're going to talk through items to look for, schedules and equipment part numbers, specifications, discussing submittal register creation and scrub, paying attention to key subcontractors invited and why that's important. And then as you go along, creating standard templates for different projects and what to look for in future design reviews that you may be invited to. So you are invited to your very first design review. Now what? Getting invited to your first design review can be a little intimidating. There you are sitting at the table with project managers, possibly ownership, superintendents, main subcontractors, and a whole gaggle of engineers. You feel pressure to contribute and you want to be helpful. We've been there. I can remember my first one. I remember just sitting there wide-eyed thinking, what am I going to say that's going to help this team? So let's dive in. Quality control items that we typically look for on all design reviews. Number one, paying attention to lead requirements. If you're a lead certified engineer or you're a lead certified point person for this project, then you are way ahead of the game. You know what you're looking for. If you're not, and you're a QC manager without that qualification, I never got my lead certification, so I always had a lead engineer that I communicated and sent the inspections and the pictures and the submittals that were required to, so then they could certify the project. But you need to pay attention to, if it is lead, what level it is. That's also going to explain things that the design team is going to look at. Bike racks. I know that sounds really corny, but that's a really easy way to score some lead points. Asphalt, how much they can or cannot have on that project, whether they can and cannot have large hard stands and still get their lead certification. I've been part of projects where they did green roofs. That is a whole new issue of possible issues that we can talk about at another time. But paying attention to lead requirements is going to be key. Looking at constructionability on items such as large concrete pours. A lot of times what looks good on paper is just really not easy in the field. And a lot of times large concrete pours don't have access, and you need to look at how can we get broken up? How can we do the pours? Where can we get the trucks access? Where are we pulling water from? Those are things you want to look at. Looking hard at mechanical rooms and clearances. I really wish I had put this as number one. I know you've heard us talk about this, and I know QC managers across the globe love to joke about it, but it's the truth. Every mech room seems to have 10 pounds of potatoes they're trying to cram in a 5-pound bag. And the design teams, whether it's the fire suppression, the electrical, the mechanical, they don't seem to all talk when they're setting up a mech room and clearances. You need to look at clearances around all the electrical panels. You need to pay attention to the VFDs. You need to pay attention to filter access for filter replacement. I don't know how many projects I go to start commissioning with teams, and they've got zero or no access to filter banks. And that is just not acceptable. And then they're ripping out and they're redoing. So please pay close attention to those mech rooms when you're sitting at that table with the engineers. You need to look at whether the engineers and designers are all under one roof and communicating well. If you're lucky to score a large design firm, then they've got civils, landscape, architects, mechanical, electrical. They've got all the disciplines under their own roof. Typically, then they are going to have many internal meetings, and they're going to have good communication. Yay, you won the lotto. If you are a small business, however, we don't win that lotto very often. And so typically you'll have a lead architect from one design firm that may have 2 or 3 disciplines, and then they're pulling in other disciplines from other firms. When they don't all have the same hat or the same company logo on their shirt, that means communication may be tricky. And about this time, you're probably thinking, Renee, I am not an engineer. I am a quality control manager. And I get it. But we're the bridge. QCs are the bridge between the different designers. They're the bridge between the designers and the construction team. You're going to be the bridge between the designers and the end user. You are a vital part on design build projects of facilitating that communication. So when you're sitting at that table, pay attention when everyone's throwing their cards or scanning their little codes so they can stay in contact. Pay attention to who is from what company. You need to look at air barrier testing requirements and constructionability. You need to look at possible holes in the building design. When you are doing a metal building, you got to just about do spray foam to pass a lot of the air barrier tests. So pay attention to that during the design. Look at electrical and comm connections for furniture packages. Most of the time at this point, we've not been awarded a furniture package, and then you don't need to worry about it. But if you've got the furniture package award as part of your building, you need to make sure that the furniture folks are talking to the comm guys and the double E's so that they know what their requirements are. So they understand what outlets, what kind of power, whether it needs to be in the wall, the floor, the ceiling drop downs, whatever they need, you need to pay close attention that the designers are picking that up. When you're talking about comm, you need to look at whether it's secured, whether it's a sipper, nipper, what separation of the raceways and the tracks. So pay close attention to that. Look at flooring types and think about moisture test. Sometimes moisture testing is a requirement in the RFP and the specs, and sometimes it's not. If you're doing a lot of poured slabs, over time that moisture is going to wick out of the concrete. If you don't do the moisture test and you lay down flooring too soon, that moisture is going to make glue stop at holding. It's going to make your floors buckle. Then you're ripping up floors, you're shot peening, your drying time. When you're at that point of a project to where you're laying down the flooring, losing schedule is like losing gold. So please pay attention to the moisture test. Talk to your design firms, talk to your flooring folks, figure out what kind of moisture testing you need to do. Also, we did a 5-star resort there in the Colorado area. We did a lot of work for the Broadmoor, if you're familiar with the Broadmoor Hotel, and they love their exotic wood flooring. And a lot of that stuff has to be flown in, and then it needs to acclimate in the building for several weeks, sometimes a month or more before it can be laid. So pay attention to that when you're looking at the flooring type, because you're going to need to get those flooring submittals in and approved fast so that the procurement can go, so that the flooring can come and sit inside the building. So look at that. Glazing. Is it ballistic glass? Ballistic glass time frame is wicked. It just seems to get worse and worse and worse. If you've got ballistic glass, you're going to need to jump on those submittals ASAP, so pay attention. Room signage. I know when you're sitting at a table right here at this point, you think room signage is the least of my worries, but we have more hiccups in room signage that holds up punch lists and final turnover, which holds up money, than I even want to count. So pay attention to room signage. Key requirements. You need to look at, is it electric key set? Is it just regular key locks? Is it a federal base? Do they have certain requirements? Are you going to need the manufacturer to send those cores to a key shop and then the key shop gives them to you to install? Are you going to keep construction cores in there and then just turn those over, and then the end user is going to install their own lock set after you go through the procurement of it? If it's an electric keying system, that takes additional training that you're going to need to think about when you're scheduling your training for the end users. So always pay attention to key requirements. Keep in mind base restrictions with access, fence lines, and photos. This is where you're going to make your O-face, and I know I'm going to really surprise you folks. Designers don't typically like to get out from behind their desk and come to site and do inspections. And if you're on a base where you can take photos, yay! Then you can take those photos, keep them up to date, be that bridge for them. But if you're not, you're going to really need to facilitate those site inspections, and you need to pay attention to how many site inspections the design team has got figured in, and at what point, what percentage of completion they want to come out. Fence lines. If you are on a secured facility, a lot of times you're not going to be able to go within 25, 50 feet of a fence line. Pay attention to that, because designers won't. And they will try to set down utility lines right next to the fence, and that just can't happen. And access, right? So how is the access to the site? How is the access going to be for deliveries for concrete trucks? Think about all those things. Okay, now that we kind of hit on the top list of QC items that we see and that we need to look at over and over again, we need to talk about schedules and equipment part numbers. This is a huge issue over and over. Designers like to spec equipment down to the part number. A lot of times designers have deals with different subs or different manufacturers. I'm not saying they're getting kickbacks. That would be unethical, but it is not completely unheard of. And then a lot of times they just want to be the hero, and they want to, show that they've picked all the way down to the part number because they're super cool. But when designers do that, a lot of times the design can sit for a certain period of time before the construction team gets it, before construction starts. And then those part numbers are obsolete. Or your subcontractor wants to use different equipment or a different manufacturer for different lead time, better pricing. There's a whole list of reasons why a sub wants to change part numbers. When equipment manufacturers and or part numbers are listed and something else is submitted, it has to be a variance submittal. And I'm going to repeat that because it's very important. When equipment manufacturers and or part numbers are listed and something else is submitted, it has to be a variance submittal. And the reason it has to be that is that's the only way to cover you and to cover your subcontractor, because it is a variance. And I know you're saying it's just a note in the equipment schedule. I've heard that over and over again, and I've seen it screw people over and over again. When the sub wants to submit something different, make sure it goes in as a variance. This is going to cause back and forth discussions to compare. The end user wants to know why. Why this? Why that? Why can't they use this? Why don't they want to use that? Why did the designer want it? Why is the sub deviating? What's a better product for the government or end user? And then sometimes they're going to get really cocky and they're going to say, why did you submit this as a variance? It's a betterment. Of course we want a betterment. Well, they don't always see it that way. And I know it sounds really silly, but this is the only way to cover you. So it depends on how green your government officials are that you're working for. And that back and forth is going to be a headache. So when you're at this design table, if you can steer the team away from manufacturers and part numbers, it's going to help. Still meet the CFM, still meet the electrical requirements, still meet, all the spec requirements, all the RPA requirements, but just don't pigeonhole us to a manufacturer or a part number. So at that table, try really hard to politically steer them away. Because it's going to be time and money for you and the design team with the back-to-back and the explanation and reviewing those submittals. Okay, specifications. So when you sit at that table, they're not going to have the specs there. They're going to have the drawings, and that's what you're going to be looking at. But specs are part of the design, so be sure to ask to review them. Lots of design teams generate their specs using an auto system at the end, and it can cause issues. You can get specs. My favorite example is a pipeline we were doing on a federal base, and it had specs for a pool. Obviously, there was no pool going in on the project, but it's slop in equals slop out. And when they auto-generate and don't check their work, and it happens all the time, then you end up with slop. Check the spec for sections that are not applicable or missing sections. A lot of times they won't have pipe labeling. They won't have all the comm specs that you need in there. They won't have room signage. They'll miss the keying. So pay attention to the specs before it gets issued, and check code references and if they align with the contract. So the front of the spec, they're always going to list their laundry list of codes. Depending on when the award is issued, they could adhere to different codes, older ones or newer ones. So it's a really easy way just to double check at the beginning. Look at your RFP and your project award, what codes are you're tied to, and make sure that that's what the designers use when they are doing their design. Okay, I know we've talked about this. You guys are probably really tired by the time you're getting to this module of me going over submittal register creation and scrub, but this is a prime time. It's the first moment you're in front of that design team to set down the rules and to lay out the footwork for how you want this to go. We sound like a broken record on this one, but discuss the submittal register creation and tell them you want to review it and scrub it, and then the design team's concurrence on the scrub before it is sent for upload or distributed. So if you're working for the Department of Energy, the DOD, NIST, GSA, a lot of those folks, they just send the register with the specification. If you're working for the Corps of Engineer, obviously it's got to be uploaded into the QCS RMS system, and because the QCS RMS system is what runs everything. So before it gets sent or distributed, you want to be able to scrub it and tell them you want the design team's concurrence on the scrub, right? Before it goes. So it's not you wanting to take control and just, hack away. It's that you want to work as a team and scrub that before it gets to that point. You need to talk about duplicate items such as product data and manufacturer's instructions. Drives me nuts. A lot of times the product data and the manufacturer instructions are the same thing. And if you're doing a submittal and doubling it up for every single piece of equipment and every piece of material, it adds so much time to you to clear it off a register. So talk about that, scrub that out. Talk about lead items if they're going to be listed on the register or if they're not. Talk about closeout items where their warranty requirements, O&M requirements, spare parts are going to be listed. My rule of thumb is it's all or nothing for me. Either that design team's going to go through and list all the required closeout items. If they're going to have it all on there, yippee skippy. It makes it a management tool for you as the QC manager when you're going after those things with the subs. But if they're going to piecemeal it and they're going to list only the O&Ms for the mechanical sub, nothing on the electrical, no spare parts, and no warranty, then it's just a pain in your butt. So I'm a all or nothing kind of girl. And I tell them, you're either going to throw me everything in there or you're going to leave the closeout items out and I'm going to manage those myself. Either way, it's a requirement. You're going to have to add those to the register and send those in. But sometimes it's cleaner and easier to do it yourself, just point blank, than to mess with it. So talk about those closeout items and how the team as a whole is going to handle them. Okay. It's really important to pay attention to the key subs that are invited. This meeting is going to show you the key subs. Usually it's just the MEPs that are going to be on the project. It is a good opportunity for you as a QC manager to feel out their strength and weakness. So they're either going to come in there guns blazing. This is how we're going to do it. I've already looked at it. We want to use this manufacturer, these part numbers. This is what I'm thinking. This is going to work. This is going to provide what the RFPs required. Or they're going to come in and they're going to be mute and they're not hardly going to talk. And they haven't even cracked the design or the RFP. The guys that are sitting there in the meeting just got told about the meeting a day or two before. They may have never done a federal project. They may have never done a formal submittal register. But this is when you can weigh that. Just keep your ears open, your eyes open, and listen. Offer to train their submittal clerk or their lead. If you're listening to this training, more than likely you've purchased the QCU membership. So in here, you've got subcontractor training. It's a recorded program. You literally get everybody in the room for the kickoff meeting and say, we're going to go through this. Push play, right? It's going to talk through submittals. It's going to talk through commissioning and testing and their requirements and how they can properly do it. But offer to train them. You've got the program you can reuse over and over again. If you offer to train them with that program, it's going to save you so much headache and so many arm wrestles and so much struggles. And they're going to take you up on it, right? For the sub, it's a win-win. It's free training and they get their submittal clerk trained. You're probably not going to say, probably won't have a say in the subs. I wish you would. They don't ask us. So if you don't have the say in the subs or how easy it is, you need to bridge that gap. You need to get off on a good relationship and that's good communication. And this is the perfect way to start. Over time in your area, you're going to build up a good feeling for the subcontractors. You're going to know their pain points. You're going to have lessons learned with different sub teams. I had an electrical contractor and I swear they were amazing in the field. Those boys could lay conduit so straight, so pretty, label it. They knew what they were doing. They were fast in and fast out. But their office side couldn't do a submittal to save their life. And so anytime we had them on a project, I just kind of went, yay, and oh. But I knew what I was getting. And over time, you're going to know that when you start working for these subcontractors or with them. You need to make sure those items that they fall down on, try to hit it off at the pass on the next project so they're not repeated on future designs. So if you've had issues specifically with certain subs and pain points, talk about that. Say, oh, hey guys, do you remember we did this one and this didn't go so hot? What can we do here at the table so we don't have that problem again? That's going to make things easier for you and your subcontractor team, your design team, everybody. So a design review when you're at the table is the time to talk through those. Okay, as you go along, you're going to create standard templates for different projects and what to look for. If you're doing a roads project, what you look for there versus a building project is completely different. Some of these templates are going to be in your head. So I know when Greg and I sat down to kind of put together this training for you, we both have different things that we look for, right? We had different things in our head. If you are a paper person, you can physically put those into templates. If you're just a experienced person, this is going to come with experience. So you get a couple design reviews under your belt and you're going to know what to look for. You're going to know what to look for with specific design teams. So some design teams may be super strong on MEP and they may not be strong on all the other finishes and details. So you're going to feel that out and you're going to know over time. Over time, I created templates to look for on roads. I had a hard stand for rebar and control joints, templates for mechanical rooms and mechanical equipment, air barrier requirements like we talked about, Electrical labeling can sometimes be tricky, so we've had different templates for different clients for that. Keying and room signage. So that's, again, kind of mirrors our first slide when we talked about QC items to look for. But this is the kind of templates that you're going to make over time. And that's going to wrap it all up. Don't be intimidated when you're at that table. Don't go mute. Find your voice. Just dive in, right? Look at that first slide that we went through and start diving through those things to look for. And when you see something that may be sticky or might not work for constructionability, just, bring it up. Hey, is there a better way? I've seen this done a better way. Can we look at this? Pay attention to your subs. Talk through them with them on their experience level. Offer to train them on their quality control requirements. That's going to set you off on a really good foot. And if you are working for a company that lets you sit on design reviews, then you are ahead of the game. Believe me, we wish every company let you at the table because we're an important part. You're the bridge, QC managers. You are the ones that are going to be managing the design for them. So I thank you for joining me today. If you got any questions, remember, hit us up and we're here to help. We'll see you on the next one.